Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast. Today we are joined by one of the OGs, the legends, probably one of the most well-known and well-liked people in coworking. I'm joined today by Flip Howard, who is currently leading the charge at Lucid Private Offices. Flip, how are you doing today?
Doing great. I like that intro. I don't know who paid you to say that, but I'll take it.
I speak to a lot of people and I always like to end off record, who should we speak to? Who's the nicest people? And you do come up with a lot. And I do think I landed up at your house after one of the conferences at some point. And you didn't know me, I didn't know you, but you were pretty welcoming. So I can agree with that. Definitely one of the most liked guys.
All right, I appreciate it.
So for folks who don't know about Flip and the things you guys are doing at Lucid, quick history lesson. You came into co-working around 24 years ago with the acquisition of Meridian Business Centers, right? That was in 2001.
We started Meridian Business. I had a business partner. He and I, we had a pickup and delivery laundry and dry cleaning service. We officed in an executive suite back in the 90s. And then we bought out our landlord, who was just a little mom and pop executive suite. And we quickly were like, we like this a lot better than washing a bunch of college kids' underwear every night. So we sold that and bought more of these. I think our first 7 from 01 to 07 were acquisition of little mom and pop executive suites that were Regis wannabes sort of thing.
Okay.
And we were called Meridian Business Centers. And our industry has always had its primary value proposition is we buy a large amount of space for a long period of time and chop it up into little pieces of space for short periods of time. But there's always been like a secondary value proposition. In the 90s, it was basically women typing documents for men. It was crazy. It was all these kind of old ladies own these executive suites. They had a team of secretaries and they typed a bunch of documents for all these guys who didn't have computers or type things themselves. And so when the first 7 locations that we bought back in the early 2000s were basically ladies going out of business with that model, and it was transitioning to the model in the early 2000s, which that value proposition got replaced with, it was basically now office space plus telecom infrastructure. So think like T1 internet lines back in 2002, video conferencing, ISDN lines, fax machines, big photocopiers, all that kind of stuff. And that was basically your kind of other value add in the early 2000s until maybe 2012 to 15-ish or so, when the kind of co-working WeWork came on the scene. And then it transitioned from office space plus basically community, the telecom stuff started to die. So we were Meridian Business Centers. We went from 1 location to 15 between 01 and about 2010 or 11 or so. Yeah, so the history, I had a business partner. He and I ran it together. 2018, January of 2018, I bought him out. We pivoted from Meridian Business Centers to Work Suites.
Yep.
So that's when we became what we are now, which is a hybrid between an executive suite and a traditional casual co-working space. We were positioning ourselves as a more grown-up co-working space, so still very private office centric, like a Regis would be, but not a dark, depressing hallway of doors. We were bright and modern and active.
Yeah.
That happened in 2018. We kept the name Work Suites for just a couple of years, though, and we transitioned to Lucid Private Offices after, I don't remember when, 2021, I think, because people were confusing us with WeWork. They thought Work Suites and WeWork, and they could never remember our name, and they just thought we were another kind of casual co-working space. And so we wanted to differentiate and use that sub moniker of private offices that no one's really using in their name to differentiate what butter is. That's the quick history of the brand industry. Yeah.
I love that. And yeah, you've touched on a bunch of things I want to pull the needle out a little bit more on. But you're now up to 26 sites, is that correct, at Lucid Private Offices?
26 or 27, yeah.
At these locations, is it mostly private offices, given the fact that it's Lucid Private Offices? Or have you still got the lounge, amenities, the other things that co-working brands do as well?
We do have a lounge and amenities like co-working brands. We dedicate a little bit less square footage to it. I think most co-working spaces are about 50-50 on their space from a rentable perspective between hallways, common areas. We try to be about 60-40. So we have a slightly smaller common areas, but nowadays offices are smaller. We do a lot of team rooms. You need spaces to break out and work. And we do offer memberships where you don't have a private office. Bread and butter is more private office centric. We don't offer like hot desk only plans. So we don't do a lot of the kind of short-term stuff. And if you walk in one of our locations, you'll see it's much more upscale. Our demographic skews a little older. a little more successful clientele. So they're not quite as fun and hip and casual. They're a little more, uh, yeah, grown up, I guess.
I mean, you say that, but I also know your team and they're all full of energy, vibrant, fantastic people. So how does that balance with the community side and how obviously more professional, you get this feel of a little bit stuffier. Is it got that vibe or is it you still have events, you still have scheduling, that kind of stuff?
We do events and it really does differ from location to location. Some of our locations are just as active and there's a huge community. And when happy hour comes, it's busting at the seams. And some of ours, people keep to themselves when there's 8 people there. we definitely make sure our team is all very co-working mindset and not the old executive suite mindset. Our clients, our members are mixed. There are a lot that are just the old executive suite mindset. And we're trying to be the best of both. We're trying to be able to give people the privacy that they could get in an executive suite, but the energy and the activation and the vibe of a co-working space, just a little bit more grown up and less casual.
That's cool. Going back to the other point that you brought up a bit earlier, the fax machines, right? That was a very big seller. People wanted that as a huge amenity. A, when was the last time you sold a fax machine? And B, what else has changed with regards to the kind of the business model? Obviously, the amenities you offer have changed, what people are looking for. So let's start with a fax machine. When was the last time you leased out a fax machine?
Gosh, it has to have been 10 years. I can't even remember. Maybe it was less than 10 years ago. I don't know. But yeah, we used to get a ton of revenue from photocopies that are now all free. We used to get a lot of revenue from long distance, which obviously is free now. We got faxes. They had lines in their office, but you also charged $1 a page for them to come to the front desk, and all that revenue went away. Yeah, it was nice because it allowed you to keep office prices low because you can make all this money from all this other stuff. Now the prices are much higher. What else has changed? I would say for the better for the customer is it's a lot more straightforward. It's a lot more all-inclusive now. Co-working has really brought a more customer-centric mindset to our industry. It used to be very nickel and dime, bait and switch, charge for everything. And so it's good to see most of that going away. It used to be very gotcha contract, like a real estate contract. And now it's more of a customer membership type of relationship.
Yep.
Yeah, customers don't like it when you say, hey, read your contract. Sorry, you owe us for the next 11 months. They didn't have a broker and a lawyer to come sign up with you like an actual real estate deal. Yeah, I think that the mindset has changed. And like I said, that all those things like fax machines and long distance and photocopies and whatnot has now just been replaced by basically the networking and the culture and the community side of it all.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we're definitely seeing that shift all inclusive. But we're also starting to see operators look at additional things to bring in revenue. Somehow going full circle, we're seeing spaces offering notary services and additional Wi-Fi provisioning. And so somehow going back to that, you get the base model, but if you want the extra stuff, is that what's in your strategy?
Yeah, we've never stopped selling all that stuff because we've made the pivot from executive suites. And it is funny. It felt like there used to be two worlds, right? It was the executive suite world that thought about everything in this way, and the far right way, and the co-working world thought about everything the far left way. And you're starting to see them really come together, and you're starting to see co-working spaces a little bit more focused on like revenue and expenses and some of those kinds of things. And you're starting to see the private office offering companies more focused on activation, energy, and community and things like that come from the co-working side. And it's all good, right? It's just evolution. Things are just getting better and better. So.
Absolutely. Is there any additional revenue sources that are new to your model? Obviously, you started charging for these things a while back. Is there anything that's something new that we haven't done in the last 24 years?
Like mail scanning is pseudo new. The fact that now a lot of our clients don't come to pick up their mail, we can scan and email it to them. Various hybrid membership plans where you have shared use of desks and part-time offices where one person's in this office Monday and Wednesday and Friday, and someone else is in it Tuesday and Thursday. And that's the next frontier, I think, for industry. It's a little bit tough to monetize, and it's not a huge percentage of our revenue yet, but we are selling more and more of those types of hybrid memberships every month. And I think nowadays that less and less people are in the office from 8 to 5 for 40 hours a week, but people are starting to realize you do need an office. And so we're trying to figure out there's less paper and less stuff that needs to be there. So the thought of using an office that you weren't in the day before, in kind of a hoteling situation is more palatable to a larger number of people than it used to be.
Yeah, that's definitely a trend we've been watching. We did a deep dive last year into fractional offices and how some operators are seeing that 30% premium on their office rent by charging it to two companies who use it on different days. It's definitely an interesting one. Having said all that, in the last 24 years, what hasn't changed? What is the one kind of standard that you can go back to if on day one to today, it hasn't changed?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just that I think what hasn't changed, again, like I said, the primary value offering that we have is we buy a large amount of space for a large amount of time and we chop it up into small amounts for a small amount of time. And we have some shared amenities, right? So that's just the arbitrage of the space and the time hasn't changed. But also, I would say one thing that people think has changed that I don't think has is the primary function of the office. I think a lot of people think that in a post COVID world where a lot of people discovered what can and can't be done remotely, and now with everyone using a cell phone instead of a desk phone and having high speed internet available on the go all the time, I think people think of the office as a place now that is primarily for collaboration and not head down work. And I would dispute that. I would think that something that has not changed is that people who think that they are just as, not all, most people who think that they are just productive doing head down work at home are wrong. And they aren't quite as productive. And they are self-reported productivity and actual productivity, I think, are two different things. I know just for myself, I work from home a lot and I'm at home maybe a quarter of the time, but I always tend to be surprised how much more I get done when I actually come in and how many fewer items got accomplished in the days when I did it from home and I thought I was being productive.
That's true. And it's really interesting because I remember back going to the whole work from home, work from office debate. Everyone's like, one or the other. And even back then I was like, that's not the two options. Firstly, it's not you have to work from home or you have to work from the office. There is the third place. There is this kind of network of spaces, this ecosystem of workspaces that you can work from. But having worked from home pretty much my entire professional career, I completely understand that there's sometimes just putting your pants on and going to a office, your days become more productive. So totally agree with you on that. It is an interesting topic around, is it actual productivity or self-reported productivity? That's
Yeah,
a really interesting one.
I'm probably more to the extreme than most people on this. I feel like what I tell people is if you want to have a mediocre home life and a mediocre work life, use the same space for both. But if you want to, I'm big on dividing. So I don't really check my phone at nights. Like when I walk in that door, I got a wife and a bunch of kids. And so I try to turn off work. And when I come to work, I forget I have a family and I try to dial in and do what I'm doing and be present to it. And so obviously having office space makes that much easier. Plus my wife hates it when I'm at home working because she's like, this place of peace and happiness now becomes you're grumpy all the time.
I get it. I'm only allowed to mention co-working X number of times in a week. Right. And if I go over that threshold, there are penalties. So I completely get the spousal pressure and support on that one. And I totally understand that a separation of family. Talking about like this idea of a workspace ecosystem. Do your members ever sign up for use of more than one location, or is it predominantly they sign up for the building that they're in?
They do a lot because we have, like I said, 26 or 27 locations in various cities. And there's a few who actually buy offices from us in those multiple cities, but a lot of them, they all are able to stop down and use the other locations. They don't use it nearly as much as they think they're going to. So it's a really nice selling feature. We're also a member of the LEXI, the League of Extraordinary Co-working Spaces. That's a really neat feature that when you're given a tour, it sounds like something that's exciting to them. They rarely use it, but it's something people think they're going to use more often than they do. Like I said, we have a few people who just have branches in different cities and they do it all the time. I do have more within city, like in Dallas Fort Worth. I think we have 15 of them here, and so we do have some real estate people and title people who end up meeting clients throughout the metro area, and they like actually one lawyer I'm thinking of who likes to be able to stop down in multiple locations within the same city.
That's interesting. And for that meeting room access, is there an app that they book at based on which location they're going to, or is it through community managers? Like how are you coordinating the tech side of it?
We really try to make their community manager from their home center their primary concierge for everything. So they take care of it all for them. They just treat that person like their personal concierge and they take care of it for them.
So everything workspace, go to that person, they're the point of contact. That's a really cool way to think of it. Especially now where the lines are being made more murky as to what are you being hired to do. Community managers joining in space, assuming that they're going to be like throwing parties and pouring tequila into the founder's mouth and things that they see on TV, but actually they'll end up sitting and copying and pasting from one screen to another all day, right? Completely different. Like both things are necessarily important in different ways.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting to see how you've positioned your community manager more as a concierge than a party organizer or things like that.
Yeah, and they do both. And we've got some that are, really big on baked goods, and they're always bringing baked goods in for their communities, and some who have poured various types of alcohol in a lot of people's mouths. But we've got a pretty fun boat party we have every summer with our whole team.
That's all. You got a pretty big team. It's got to be a pretty big boat.
Crazy, but what's that?
That's a pretty big boat. You got a pretty big team.
Yeah, I think we're about 100. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's awesome. And so, has anyone been with you since the Meridian days all the way through to Lucid?
Yeah, so my direct reports, my executive team, I have more than I'd like. I think I have 9 direct reports, but I think 6 of the 9 have been with me for more than 15 years. I don't have anyone who's been with me since 01. I think my top one has her 20th coming up this year, but I think I have 2 or 3 that are in the 19 and 18 range. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's great. As in any business, people are everything, right? Yeah. And so I feel like this whole business could go away tomorrow, and I could take this core group and go sell shoes and be successful.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So, a bunch of the conversations I've had recently is all about, is there a career to be made in co-working? A lot of folks, they join because of the benefits, the improvements on the other hospitality industry. You don't have to work nights. You don't have to work weekends most times. You don't have to worry about clients at 3 o'clock in the morning doing weird things, but not many of them stay in co-working. So as someone who's hired a whole bunch of people, 100 plus people, what is the number one the reason you think people come to our industry, but also what are you doing differently that helps them stay in co-working?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. Co-working, again, now we're going back to like executive suite days, redrawing that old line that I'm glad is disappearing. Co-working hasn't been around that long, and a lot of them, like I said, weren't very good at figuring out how to stay in business by making money. And so there's a lot of people who they didn't make enough money to pay their people enough to really keep them. And not that it's all about money. Almost all of my top people, have gotten plenty of offers to go make more money doing something else. And I don't know that. I think, yes, they like the co-working industry, and our model has been a little more revenue and expenses centric, so we've always been able to afford to pay them well enough. But I think more than that, people can sense if they're being used or not. And I believe that it is just like with any commerce, it has to be win-win. If I go drive through McDonald's, they have to be glad to take my $10, and I have to be glad they were there to give me the fries and the shake for the $10. And there's no winner or loser in that transaction. Yep. And it has to be the same with employer, right? This has to be to the benefit of both people. If I know someone who could present one of my employees with a better life situation, not just more money, but a whole better life situation, it's my moral obligation to make that introduction. And so as long as you keep that mentality towards your employees and you're not using them, and you're always putting them in a situation that is better than any other situation they could be in, then why would they ever leave?
And I do know, as I said, I work with a lot of your team and they're all very happy. So you're doing something right there, and they're definitely sharing the same sentiment that, they feel valued, they feel seen, especially some who come over from other employers before. So glad to hear that there's some thought process, but I think you also set a pretty good leadership style, right? If you're not answering your phone at night, they're not expecting to send you things at night. Therefore, their night becomes their night, and it trickles down that way, right? So I definitely think there's something there.
Yeah, I could count on one hand every year the number of calls I make to anyone after 5 o'clock. Way less than one hand. It just doesn't. We work hard, and I expect them when they're here, like everybody busts it. Their time is their time, and I'm also very. Whatever the opposite of a micromanager is to a flaw, that's me. Like, I let people run and do their thing. And if I give them enough rope to succeed or hang themselves with. And so we do probably fire a higher percentage of people than most, the ones that are, not a fit. I think it's way better to just do that quickly rather than to let it linger for a long time. I think that's actually, it's funny that it sounds like, wait a minute, I thought this was a nice guy, and all of a sudden he likes to fire a lot of people. No, I just think that if something's not a good fit, letting it linger is bad for not just those 2 people, but everybody else. Yeah. And so I feel like almost always when someone has to be let go, it's better for them too. You're not doing them a favor keeping them a job they're not thriving at. And so
absolutely. I mean, you're also well enough connected, I think, that, and you've got pretty much a good enough reputation as yourself and as Lucid that if someone does leave, they're pretty much, if they want to stay in the industry, they can find something
Right.
that's more suitable to the way they work, something like
Right.
that. So I wouldn't say it's necessary that you're not a good person, put it that way. So I've got a few more questions. On the model side, you've said it, I think, twice so far, that your business model is to take space for a longer time, chop it up into smaller pieces and lace it out at a simpler time.
Mhm.
What is Lucid's core economic model? Is it, that rent arbitrage, 40, 50-year leases, chop it up for 1, 2-year leases? Or is it management agreements? Or is it owner, you buy the buildings and you are the owner operator?
Yeah, no, we exclusively do leases. So we'll sign a 10 to 15 year lease and we keep all the upside. We have guaranteed rents and we don't do the management agreements. We have 3 that are left that are management agreements. I don't like them as much. We can go into more detail on that later, but
Yeah.
I prefer to keep the upside and I vet them and we only sign locations that I'm 100% sure are going to work. So I want the upside of those deals. We haven't bought any buildings yet. I think I just like being able to grow more rapidly than that. So I like the fact that I can add, we just grow out of cash flow. So my capital stack is super simple. Like I own 2/3 of the company and I have an 82-year-old family friend, angel investor that owns 1/3 of the company. And that's it. We have no debt. We have no investors. We have no board. And so we're simple. I just grow out of cash flow. So we can open 4 or 5 new locations this year, just out of cash flow. And that's what we did.
Or blah. I mean, it's really interesting because everywhere you look, we're seeing like, oh, this company did management agreement, this company did management agreement. And I'm like, but not everyone's doing them. Yes, a lot of companies are trying them and a lot of landlords are seeing the upsides and lower risk of being able to just take back the space as many of the clauses. But what has pushed you away from management agreements? And obviously it's financial, but what
It's
else?
and I'm not anti-management agreement for our industry. I'm way more in support of management agreements than leases for people who don't really know what they're doing. I've seen quite a few deals that were signed that are awful deals that are traditional leases, and that's just such a black eye in our industry, and it's going to go out of business. It is, and the landlord's going to not want to do co-working in any of their properties going forward, and it's terrible. Yep. I would much rather management agreements be out there if the operator isn't seasoned and doesn't know exactly what they're doing. I also think that management agreements have the ability to be the very best types of deals. There's an alignment between the operator and the landlord that is ideal, better than it could ever be in my sort of landlord-tenant relationship with my landlords. And a couple reasons why I haven't done them. One is I know what I'm going to make, and the landlord is always giving me basically credit for 50 cents on the dollar of when I'm seeing a dollar for dollar credit. So it's a match of the value of that. Also, I don't like them owning the customers. We've been in the business 24 years, long enough now to where I'll be in a location for 10 or 15 years, and then that style gets old and I need to move it to another location. And I can move 80-85% of my customers and keep that customer base. Yeah, those are the 2 main reasons that I haven't done management agreements. But again, that's not for everybody. I get why operators want to do it because it's obviously way less risk. I'd say the third reason, and actually this might even be the biggest one, probably the biggest reason why I don't do management agreements is that this business is a lot about location. And I like to cherry pick the best locations. I like to be in buildings that are at the right corner, at the right price point. And 9 out of 10 of those landlords would prefer a lease rather than a management agreement. And yes, I may be able to find one that's not quite as good of a building, that's maybe a little bit higher priced, that's not exactly where I want to be to find a landlord willing to do a management agreement, but I don't want that deal. I think if you have a bad lease, if you're in a bad location, it doesn't really matter how well you run your business. You're dead in the water if you aren't in the right spots. And so I like to, go into a market, figure out the best submarkets, figure out kind of the best areas of those submarkets, and then try to find a building that's not too expensive there.
Yep. And you obviously have more negotiating or more net leverage if you're going in with what the landlord is more used to, more expecting. Right. You don't have to compete on training them on your business model.
Right.
They already know.
There's been 1 or 2 that we've lost that really preferred the management model, and they wanted someone who did more of those. And we offered to do that, but we don't have as much experience with them as some others do. And I'd say for every one of those, there's 10 that wants to talk to me for a lease and not about the management agreement.
That is interesting. You said you got some growth coming up. which new cities? Are you planting any flags in any new cities that you can head towards where we'd be seeing more Lucid private offices?
Yeah, so we only look at cities like I call them NFL-sized cities, where I can put 2 to 5 locations in a city. I don't want to really just do one anywhere. So we've got right now we have 3 in Atlanta, we have 2 in Phoenix, we have 5 in Houston, and we have 15 in Dallas Fort Worth. We're looking to expand. Dallas Fort Worth, they have basically enough, but we're looking to expand in Houston and Phoenix and Atlanta. And we're also looking at other Sunbelt markets like Nashville's high on the list, Charlotte's high on the list, Tampa, Orlando's high on the list. Cities in these growing Sunbelt markets that are still big cities.
That's interesting. So we're going to say about another 25 years before we see you on either of the coasts?
No, not 25, because you run out of these cities pretty quickly. I could see us hitting both of the coasts, but yeah, and say 5 to 10 years.
Okay. You heard it here first, folks.
There you go.
So that's really interesting. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about some of the changes that are more technologically focused, right? We're seeing these huge shifts and kind of undercurrent trends about things coming into the market that are really changing how some operators are thinking. I just want to run them by you and see how you're thinking about them.
Yeah.
First up is e-commerce. This idea of you should be able to buy an office or book an office online or book a whatever membership and not have to interact with a salesperson or anyone like that. How is Lucid thinking about co-working in e-commerce?
It's something that I've been asking for 2 years. I don't know why we don't do it already. We're stupid to not do it. Everybody's stupid for not doing it right now. We should all be doing it. And we're trying to get it out as fast as we can.
Got it.
I guess it's a little more complicated than I think. It's saying it's a bigger project, but we should all be doing it. We hemmed and hawed about offering virtual offices and co-working memberships online and said, no, they need to talk to somebody about it. It's going to cannibalize our sales. And of course, when we offer those online, our sales doubled. And this would be the same way. There's no reason for everybody not to do that.
I agree. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm a bit biased being in the tech and integration side as my day job. Yeah. I can completely see that's a shift. And I'm glad to hear that it's not that you don't want to do it, but it's that you just can't get there fast enough.
Yeah.
But you did mention virtual offices. We're seeing this shift of additional products, right? You mentioned fractional offices a bit earlier ago. You mentioned virtual offices now. What product types do you think are going to be really popular this year and next year?
I think virtual offices is good, and hybrids between virtual office and sort of meeting room packages and hybrid offices and memberships and hot desks, all those things that people are packaging those together in various ways. But the virtual office, basically having a headquarters, whether that's to receive mail or packages or to just list as your headquarters. There's a lot of people who don't need a physical office who need that. And that's been an old executive suite offering for a long time. And co-working side of the business was always a little bit, they offered it, but it was always as an afterthought and never really pushed it much. I would say to every co-working person, push it, invest money into advertising for it. Like it's huge. It doesn't take up any inventory. I think our average, we have one location that does 50,000 a month in virtual business. Our average is over 10,000 a month in virtual business per location. And that's straight to the bottom line. It'll be like McDonald's not selling fries or Coke. Their margin on that 80% or whatever. So it's like that.
That's amazing. And thanks for sharing those numbers. I know that a lot of times folks come on and they're like, yeah, we're doing tremendous numbers, but they don't share what the actual numbers are. So I appreciate you doing that here on the show. I just had 2 more questions and I'll let you get back to your day. So throughout the 24 years, you've gone through essentially 3 rebrands, right? One from Meridian, then to Workspace, then to Lucid Private Offices. Other than changing the paint on the outside, what has stayed the same internally? Is it like, I know you have a sign behind you that says what you believe in as a company. What is like the main core thing that has not changed from Meridian through to Lucid Private Offices?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because I made this whole, we spent a lot of time on this, what we believe, our core principles. And it really, our number one is work is good, where you do it matters. It's really those 2 things. I really do believe that work isn't a drudgery that we should try to avoid. I think if we all won $1 billion lottery, after about 6 months, we'd be less happy if we didn't do something to deploy that and continue to work. I think it's part of what makes us human and separates us from the animals is actually the creativeness of working. And so I think that work itself is, and I think the space design is a big part of that. Like I think that space that is too depressing, that makes you not want to go to work, and space that is basically all about play and almost escapism from work are both opposite pendulum swings. And I believe that the space should be inspiring to do actual productive work, and that you're the happiest and most fulfilled when you actually get a lot of work done in a day. And so that work is good where you do it matters. I think the where you do it matters side of it, the analogy I always use is people will spend $20,000 to save up for 10 years to take a vacation, to sit by a pool at a tropical resort and sip a cold beer or margarita. You can do the same thing in a roadside motel on I-35 for $50, but it's depressing because you're doing the literal exact same thing, but where your surroundings matter, right? And yeah, I would say that's been the core of it. Just this idea that getting work done makes the world a better place, right? A lot of people work in nonprofits, and that's wonderful, but good commerce uplifts society too, if done right, approached right. So I think that I love that we've got 3,000 or 4,000 companies that office with us that are all doing their things. Yes, a lot of them are nonprofits too, but doing these amazing things. And I've said before, I feel American GDP would be higher and there'd be less poverty in the world if I could get 10 Lucid locations in every city in America. And I really believe that. So that's why we keep doing it.
I love that. And that brings me to like my last question. Having gone through the dot-com bubble, ridden through the Great Recession of 2007, gone through the pandemic in 2020, a lot of operators now are looking at what's happening in the world and they're panicking about longevity, sustainability. Having gone through all of those, what is one piece of advice that you would give either your team or your competitors regarding how do you build a lasting business in this industry?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because, yeah, like I said, we did get into it, then the dot-com bubble, then the recession of 2008, 2020, COVID was the worst of all of them. I think for me, and maybe this is just my personality, I'm a kind of a conservative, low risk, low leverage. You heard my capital structure. Like I don't get stretched too thin. But even there's no right or wrong answer to that. That limits my upside. And there are people who like to lever and grow faster. And I think that's fine. What I don't think is fine is there are people who feel like they're getting into this industry for these ideas that don't pencil out. Like I think just good old fashioned business revenue and expense modeling is what's missing sometimes from our industry. I mean, just for example, it's pretty obvious. Okay, everybody knows what rent you're going to pay. Let's say there's a space and it's 30,000 feet. And you're going to pay $50 a foot. It's going to cost you $100,000 a month for rent, whatever. That's easy. And you can draw it out how many desks you can get in there. Then do the math, because a lot of people, they're renting spaces and they cost, let's say, $65 a foot for the space. And they haven't really reverse engineered and said, that means per desk, I need to charge $900. Okay. Is anybody around you getting $900 per desk? If not, don't sign the $65 lease. Go find a $40 lease where you can charge $500 a desk. And it's really simple math that I think is not done a lot of times. I think a lot of times when people do the pro forma, they just plug in 1 million memberships as the filler number to make to get in the black instead of the red. But it's really just the basic revenue and expenses, because things won't always be awesome. Everybody could succeed in this business in 2018 and 2019. It was so easy. When it got really hard, and the last 4 years have been much, much harder. And who knows what the next 10 years will be like, but I have a feeling there's gonna be a mixture of both.
I love that. Just like go right down to the potato and the beans and like the unit economics. Make sure your numbers make sense and you can write it out. And look after your team. Going back to what you were saying a bit earlier. I love that, Flip. Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for sharing so openly and for all that you do. And I cannot wait to see you again this year at some point. Anything else that you wish that I should have asked you that I didn't before we hop out?
No, I think I'm good. You didn't ask me about my 7 kids or any of my 2 and almost 4, soon to be 4 grandkids. But otherwise, no, I know we were talking about kids earlier. So, no, but I really enjoyed the chat and I appreciate you asking me to do it. Happy to do it anytime.
Perfect. I'm sure we'll bring you back in. There's going to be a lot of changes this year. We're already on my back of my mind. We have to ask you more about e-commerce. We have to ask you more about AI bots and agents and all that stuff. So I'm sure folks who are listening in, you're going to hear more from Flip over the next couple of months. So we look forward to having you back on soon.
Sounds good. Take care.